And so, hi, my name is Lars Nordqvist, and I come from the northern part of Sweden, from Umeå. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to present to you today. And please interrupt me or ask questions or do whatever. Go via Juha and he will repeat the question to me if you write it in the dashboard or the control panel. So nice to have you all online. You can see that there are 33 of you. So thank you for coming and listening. So today I will I'll just manage a bit here. Yeah, hope you can see this. Connecting the dots, it's an interesting topic itself, just to connect the dots. I will talk about advantages and risks with digitalization. Yeah, I'll start a bit with myself. What you will realize during this presentation is, of course, that I am kind of colored of my background as well. At the moment, I am working at the Department of Political Science at Umeå University. And my main tasks and my main part of my employment is that I educate principals within the Swedish school system, meeting them during their three-year education period. Yeah, it's really interesting work. I come from a background where I've been working as a teacher for like 13 years with children and young adults. And I've also been working within the non-formal education since 2008 or so, within the Youth in Action program mainly related to recognition of learning through the Youth Pass program, for example, being a national trainer within that program. Since last year, I'm also a member of the Pool of European Youth Researcher, the payer, and I'm also part of the European Training Strategy Advisory Group in Brussels that is managed by Salto. So what you will see today is when I talk about these advantages and risks with digitalization, I am colored by these backgrounds and I'm colored by the Swedish contexts. And that's also what I discussed in my thesis that I defended 2016, where I discussed learning in both formal and non-formal education in relation to information and communications technologies like ICTs. So I discussed the non-formal education and the formal education and maybe how they can be bridged by ICTs, or maybe they are. I also actually had a quote from a participant that was saying that the non-formal education system is kind of connecting the dots between the knowledge that you get in formal education. So connecting the dots, in my mind, it's about the role of non-formal education as well. So this is me, and this is Umeå University. The Northern Light is actually also the name of our sculpture here, but we actually had a real Northern Light, and it's often in winter. Now it's supposed to be summer, but at least we have 12 or 13 degrees or so. Living in the northern part of Sweden, as you see here on the map, in a sense, digitalization is crucial. So bridging geographical gaps, you could say, by the digitalization, to be able to do like I'm doing now, connecting to you coming from all over the Europe and maybe also in Asia even, I don't know. We're going to the eastern part of Europe, and being able to connect to you is, of course, important when I live as far up north as I do. And I'm going to try to incorporate social inclusion as well. And I know when I've been working as a trainer in the European Union context, I've also been an inclusion case. I know that organizers have ticked the box that yes, geographical inclusion, we have Northern Sweden, perfect. So I'm also kind of an inclusion case from a geographical point of view. ICT's digitalization and education is often what I kind of have in mind or in heart. 13 years as a school teacher, went to later also working, what could you say, really organized in the non-formal education system, started to reflect on learning and mobility and other concepts like what is an NGO, what is non-formal, and so on. But I like to talk a bit about this picture. It's 50-year-olds in school. They are 15 and they have an experiment. They are using in this case, a tablet to document their experiment. They have, it's about how yeast works and how you can add yeast and make dough swallow. And what you see here is that they have made documentation of their experiment and it failed. So they had it on movie when they failed with this experiment. And then they showed the teacher, and the teacher came to them and said, okay, can we look at the film together? So they looked at the film and they stopped at the moment they kind of failed. And then the teacher asked a few questions. Okay, what happened here? Could you do something different? And they changed the recipe, or yeah, the recipe for how to do it. So they added yeast in another together with, I think it was flour or so, and another thing. And it worked for them. So they filmed when they failed and they filmed when it was a successful experiment. And then they could use this film, upload it to a YouTube channel. And the teacher wanted to use it later in his school to show that, okay, now you have it on your YouTube channel. Next time we will have a test. You can use whatever material you have on the YouTube channel to argue for me why you have learned about this process where you use yeast. And this was a situation that kind of meant something to me when it comes to digitalization. And this was informal education, but it can be added to anywhere. First of all, it was in a way innovative to learn things in another way, to film it and to show it and highlight it in another way. But also the teacher, he had to kind of break the rules for the formal system that was there at the moment. Could you use the YouTube channel for testing, for example? So he was experimenting. The children could use the YouTube channel in the tests. They could use it to argue. And then the teacher decided, why shouldn't all national tests be made in the way that they could use any digital tool that they need? He is now discussing with the government in this country where this experiment has been performed. We are not there yet that you can use the digital tools in any tests or national tests, but they are allowed in the tests in school environments at least. So we have to kind of change the structures that are around formalized systems, school or not. I will talk a bit as a starting point. I will use my work as I've been doing for the partnership. I've been writing on a paper called Analysis of the Digital Transformation of Society and its Impact on Young People's Lives. It's been a challenge to do it, and I will tell you about it a bit and a bit of the content. And then after I presented the paper, I will reflect also on advantages and risks, which is, of course, the theme for this seminar, or a webinar as it's called. The paper itself aimed to offer some kind of analytical and strategical implications regarding the digital transformation of society, and to explore the intersection between young people's lives and the digital transformation of society, and incorporating the purpose of enhancing social inclusion. So what I did was that I looked at 16 different policy documents, and I did it in the way that I was analyzing them from the perspective, what are the problems that I tried to highlight with this policy? What are the problems represented to be? Why are they writing this policy in this way? So that was kind of my starting point. And you see I used some of key policy documents from the Council of Europe and European Commission, European Union mainly, and also added some UN and OECD. And what I found was that when I looked at the problem, so to speak, that I brought forward through this policy, was kind of 4 themes. I will present them briefly now. First of all, understanding the digitalization through perspectives on technology is about how do we perceive technology developments and how it can add something new to our lives in a sense. I will talk about integrated or isolated attitudes, give numerous examples of expressions of this. I will talk about the broad palette of instruments that is there to support readiness for the ongoing digital transformation. And I will also add the part about the transformation of organizations that support the younger generations. Is this the digital youth work? To understand the digitalization through perspectives on technology. Well, maybe someone recognizes this. Let's start here. Anyone seen this before? 1957. In 1957, this was launched from what was the former Soviet Union. It was the Sputnik. And the Sputnik is often described as a kind of starting point in a technology competition, technology development competition, we could call it, where the Russians or the former Soviet Unions were first in space with this Sputnik, and this triggered some kind of technology need throughout the world. US realized this and wanted also to invest a lot in technology. And the 1960s is described according to several sources as a decade where technology developments were really important. And at the same time, there was also economic crisis around the world. The 1960s had it, and the UN, for example, or the World Bank realized that, okay, we have technological developments, and we also have a school system that is not really doing what they should do when it comes to technology. There are a lot of technological opportunities, but the schools aren't using it. So the 1960s was kind of a decade where economical crisis, new technology put pressure on education and to change society as a whole. And I often use this image as a starting point because, in a sense, you could see that we could recognize this situation in society today. We have had an economic crisis starting from the Stern hedge funds that crashed in the US in 2007. We had economic crisis that followed throughout the world. We had a lot of pressure on the educational systems to adapt to this, and we had huge technological advances, and the increased use of internet is just 2 more billion people have started to use internet just from 2007 to 2017. So it is kind of a huge increase, and at the same time there is a kind of a fear for technology, and that is maybe seen as the risks. But there is also a hype where we think that, okay, technology can solve anything. So there is a battle going on between this hype where we believe in technology, and there's also these risks of technology. So it's a kind of a black and white in that sense. Yes?
Lars, there is one comment or a question here. Krenare is writing that they have completed their master's degree on learning technology and education, and they have been thinking about whether we should see technology as a powerful tool which has driven forward changes in our society and education, or is it the other forces around us which have had an effect, or is it a combination of these? So do you think technology is one of the driving forces behind societal change, or is it something else?
This is really an interesting question. What came first? Was it the hen or was it the egg? In a sense, humans are developing the technology. The technology is developed along with humans. And I think what did Marshall McLuhan said, first we create our technologies, and then the technologies creates us, or in a way it was something like that. He meant that, okay, we start making technologies, but then we adapt to how the technologies work. So it's an ongoing process, I would say. You cannot say that what comes first is really a tough thing for me to say, of course. In a sense, I think the technological development are driven because of some kind of needs from the humans. They see that, okay, we need to be more effective in a way, or we can do things more efficient, or we can do things in another way that we enjoy, and then we develop the technologies. And then in a way, yeah, I think McLuhan said, first we shape our technologies, then our technologies shape us. So it's kind of a way that they, it's a collaborative work, so to speak. Yeah, I hope that answered your question in a sense. And also, when it comes to technology and the developments that has been throughout history with the technology developments, the information and the information society is, information is the key in this development also, I would say. And I have seen, for example, this is Luciano Floridi, who has written the On Life Manifesto, the European Union initiative, trying to rethink or reconceptualize how we view ICTs. And he says that we have, okay, we've been in prehistory where we had no ICTs, and then the development of ICTs has come in the history as we know it, and we have had information and communication technologies, but we could choose to use them sometimes. But now we have come to a stage that he calls hyperhistory, meaning that, okay, the individual and the social well-being, we are now dependent on ICTs, and whether we like it or not, we need this information, and we need to retrieve this information, and we need to be able to connect to various forms of social services, or even be able to if you need to report sick at a hospital and get the help, maybe you need to get online and do this, for example. So what I would like to say that it's technology has a history. It's been developing the views. We have seen advantages and risks throughout history, and they are changing also along. And this, in a way, why I've highlighted this is that when I look at the policy regarding digitalization and regarding social inclusion and how digitalization can maybe have an impact on the social inclusion, is that they tend to be, okay, either you are connected to internet or you're being part of this hyper historical situation, or you have very poor access to information or good access to information. You have a high level of information friction, meaning that it's really hard to retrieve the information that you want to retrieve, or you have a really low level where you can get any information at any time almost. In a way, in a situation when news travels fast and news travels slow. And maybe this is just about access. Did they build enough internet for anyone to access? And when I've been trying to look at various statistics, you can see there is a difference just among the member countries of the Council of Europe. There is a big difference where some countries have 98% of all citizens have it, with almost 19 megabit per second as an average level of download capacity. And some countries have a download capacity of about 5.4 or 5.6 megabits per second, and almost 40% of the population doesn't have it at all. So, but this focus now is on youth, and I know it. And when I try to look at numbers at youth, it seems like almost all countries tend to have at least 80% of all the young people have been accessing internet for the last 3 months. But access, I think, is one thing that could be more researched. What does real access mean? But I will get back to you on that point a bit later, because even if you can access internet 1 or 2 times the last 3 months, do you have access to the arenas that you really need to have access to? So from a social inclusion perspective, it can be about just having broadband, but you can also ask the question, what do you need a broadband for, and what do you need access to? I'll get back to you. Please come with more questions if you'd like to. I don't like my voice all the time to just rabbiting on. Yeah, if you Google on the internet, there is a Maslow the Maslow hierarchy of needs. Of course, this is you can look at this triangle and you see in this original version, what's important for humans is that you have these physiological needs first. You need air, shelter, water, food, sleep, sex, and so on. And then safety and security, social needs, friendship, esteem, self-esteem, confidence, and creativity, problem solving through that gives you self-actualization. I often find it a bit funny that now to be able to have this physiological needs, you need to have internet, you need to have Wi-Fi, you need to have battery. But it's a bit something to laugh at maybe, but it's also the situation. And I think this can be provocative, some in a way seen as an advantage, and in a way seen as a risk. So this was from a Twitter account. So what is the challenge then? Yeah, maybe this answers the questions I got before also. Knowledge is expressed in our abilities to merge and collaborate with external tools and to integrate them into the flow of our doings, whether these are intellectual, physical, or mixed. And I think this thing about integrating the ICTs into the flow of our doings also needs a certain kind of view on technology. It's not that you just always are online or offline. It's not that you always, sometimes you use the digital technology, sometimes you not. You have to look upon the technology as something you choose to use when you need to use it. And you can choose not to use it when it's not useful. And maybe that needs a lot of competences, for example. And digital competence is one thing that is proposed in many policy documents, for example. So to integrate the tools into the flow of our doings, it needs a certain kind of technology view and a certain view on information and communication technologies also.
There is one question, Lars.
Yes.
The question is from Alessandra Coppola, and the question is that how can we face the lack of human contact and the related benefits when it comes to digital youth work? So how do we face the lack of human contact?
Yeah. Once again, if we integrate ICTs in the correct way, so to speak, the correct way now, whatever correct way is, and if you consider that human contact is important, then we integrate them in such a way that we don't, if we need human contact, we kind of take that into our minds when we use that as well. So the digital youth work, I would be surprised if we only do it in a way that we don't have any human contact, so to speak. In a way, we have human contact in the online discussions, but we don't hug or kiss or whatever we need for the close relationship building. And when that is important, we will have that as well. That is what I think. And I understand the risk of not having that human contact in a sense versus how can we use the digital tools in a way that we can have both. Can we integrate that view? So that is, of course, a question back to all of you. When do we do the digitalization only and when do we not, so to speak? Or should we have an integrated view where we can actually use the digital tools and also fulfill our other needs? Hope that answered your question in a way. So the integration thing then, integrated in the flows of our doings. Maybe I had the opportunity to read applications for the conference before the symposium, and I took a lot of keywords from these applications that kind of says something about that we're in a, the digitalization has of course been an ongoing process for many, many years. And the digital transformation of society also has a longer history than just it didn't start today. But when you look at a lot of the concepts that you read about or the words used when you talk about digitalization, these are some examples that come from the applications. And I've highlighted some of them because I was trying to reflect on them a bit. So for example, the citizenship, digital citizenship that I've highlighted, that's one of them. Is the citizenship really digital? Or is it just citizenship, but we use the digital way, so to speak, is one way of also doing it. But since digitalization is an important issue in the society, maybe we have to talk about digital citizenship as something of its own. But still, digital citizenship, in my mind, is also a citizenship thing. Governance, the internet governance, is a hot topic also. The Internet Governance Forum, for example, organized by UN, where internet governance has been its own part in the governance structure. Violence can be digital, but is it really digital violence, or is it just violence? Digital education, something. Education, it is about education. Is it really digital, or is digital just a way to do the education? And also digital participation. The digital participation seemed to be highlighting something new. You can use the digital tools or digital resources to be kind of participating, but still it's about participation. But these are some words used in the application before this conference, and it would be really interesting to be part, of course, in the discussions to see what is it really the problems that we need to solve. If it is about internet governance, is it really internet governance or just governance problems? Is it citizenship problems when we talk about digital citizenship, for example? So what I did was one of the themes that I described in this analytical paper was about integrated or isolated attitudes. And this derived with regard to a number of examples of conceptions related to the field of youth. They were expressed in dualistic ways, in a way where they were possible to understand as two negotiated and distinct parties. So they were isolated or integrated attitudes. And often it is used, words are, for example, connecting the dots is one thing. You can connect the dots between two various worlds or two various understandings. To connect them or to bridge them is also commonly used, for example.
Lars, sorry, there's a question from the previous thing. There's a question whether you can shortly explain what you mean by mobile youth work.
Yeah, I'll go back to it. Yeah, the mobile youth work is a concept. Well, I took the word from the applicants, so maybe the applicants should explain it. Mobile youth work, in my mind, this is just my interpretation. This is important. We should ask the one who wrote it, actually. But mobile youth work, I could see mobile youth work in connection to mobile learning or mobile education, where you can, for example, use mobile devices to have a connection between the youth worker and youth, for example. It is related to a word called ubiquitous learning, where you can have a contact anytime, anywhere, using basically any device. So mobile youth work is the possibility to be on the go, so to speak, and still be part of the youth work. Yeah, that's the best interpretation I can do. It's not about mobility between countries, but rather in relation to the tools like smartphones or tablets or so, where you can use it on the go, so to speak. Hope that answered your question in a sense. So another kind, I will move on a bit from this discussion about integration or isolation. Another thing that can be seen as kind of risks or advantages is I hear proposed the human versus robots. I know it's a bit over the top, so to speak. Why do I say that it is kind of the human versus robots? I would like to give some examples also about advantages and risks where we have the robots. This is someone saying, what if assessment was designed around me rather than him? And I use this image when I want to talk about PISA is they make big measurements of students' knowledge and often used to measure how good the schools are and the level of knowledge in schools today around the world, and they compare different countries, and they often actually realize that Finland is the best country. They are often in the top, as has been the last. Singapore and Finland are often in top, but they also measured how good students are to collaborate with each others. And what they do is that these are 16-year-olds. They collaborate online with someone in problem solving, and then they work together, discuss, and see how good they are at collaborating and collaborative problem solving. But what the students do not know is that it is a robot that they are working together with. And the paper I have on the right side here on the screen, maybe it's on the right side on your screen as well, actually shows that when humans collaborate with this robot in problem solving, working with the robot has shown that they are actually they are better at problem solving with this robot instead of just working among students. And this was for me first provocative when I heard it, working with a robot. Also coming from a non-formal education background where I know where relations, discussions, meeting others. But then I needed to read a bit more about it. And this is from a Swedish context, that the students were really good in Sweden at collaborating with this robot. And the robot often helps in the collaboration because they are really straightforward. If you make one kind of answer to this algorithm, it's all actually an algorithm that is programmed. So using the word robot is, they call it robot. So what they do is that the students, when they post the question, say, okay, I want to solve it like this. Then the robot says, oh, do you really want to do it like that? I think this is better. And the robot gives answers back to the students. And the robot can give really precise answers, and they don't really care about feelings in this case. So they can bring the process of problem solving further, making them or forcing them to solve the problem in a better way, so to speak. So I realized that, okay, they could use a robot to make some kind of problem solving, and it can be better. It doesn't mean that it always gets better, but in this case, it was. And this was one example where I realized that, okay, they are using robot for assessment and for tests. Another thing is a Swedish municipality. They reported using a robot, an algorithm actually, to administrate routine tasks concerning applications for economic maintenance support during unemployment. So there was a person that was unemployed and he needed to know, can I get some economic maintenance support during this period? So they have to fill in a form on the internet, and when they have filled in the form and sent it, there is an algorithm or a robot. So he is checking a lot of okay, systems, other systems that helps to collect information. Okay, how much salary did this person have before? For how long had he worked, and so on. And within 45 to 60 seconds, he can say, okay, you will get maintenance support. You will get this sum of money when you're unemployed, so you know how much you can get. And it took the robot 45 to 60 seconds to decide this sum of money, instead of 3 to 7 minutes for an average administrator. So what happens in this case, this was a test. They realized, the administrators, okay, we don't have to work as much with this maintenance support that the robot can do. We can instead start to discuss with this person. Okay, you need a new job. How can we help you? And they could get more engaged into the personal meeting with the persons who are unemployed. So the administrator's role, they changed, and they were now able to provide more support to citizens, which in the end made more citizens come back to work because they could get more support. So this was a good thing. And then say, okay, everybody should have this robot. Yeah, that's what another municipality in Sweden thought. So they were also investing money in this robot. And then all administrators just ended and quit their work because they said, no robot will come and take our work. So they just ended their work and they could not go through with this robot in another municipality. So what was an advantage in one municipality was seen as really a risk in another municipality.
Lars, there's a question here regarding the algorithms. Were the algorithms in question using artificial intelligence and machine learning from students' responses? Do you know?
I cannot say exactly how they did. I don't think they had machine learning in this case. I think they were more programmed just to make specific tasks. Whether they have machine learning or not, I cannot answer in this case. I bet you can get to know that if you Google the municipality of Trelleborg in Sweden. I know then you can learn a bit more about it. Yes, I hope that answered your question. Then of course another thing that has become a risk, I would interpret it as, is when the use of algorithm, really the Cambridge Analytica. I think a lot of you have heard about the Cambridge Analytica. And the company, it has been accused of harvesting and using data from almost 87 million Facebook users. And the ambition of the company, according to the press, was to support politicians and political organizations to get these favorable results of political campaigns, at least according to the New York Times, if we look at them. So again, the robots and the algorithms can, of course, be both an advantage and both a risk. And I know it can affect a lot of people in a negative way, but also in a positive way. So once again, integrating advantages or isolating risks. And then also as a background, when I talk about these risks and advantages, what I see in the policy is that there are a broad palette of instruments that are offered to support this readiness for the ongoing digital transformation, to make people ready for it. And if you look, for example, it's one of the, as stated in one of the policies, is that digital youth work should incorporate an inclusive approach and make use of technology to increase access and support young people's participation in society. To overcome barriers, to participate, and to be digitally engaged is underlined. And maybe you are familiar that there are digital competence based on key competencies of the European Union, for example, or the DIG-comp policies of the Council of Europe. And they promote the digital literacy, the social competences, the cultural competences, and so on. So the reading through the material and the policy seems that there is a need to enhance the competences among young people to kind of prepare them for the future. And maybe it's always been like this in a way. I mean, the key competences in 2006, when they first were taken in the European Union, was also talking about an uncertain future, and we don't know the jobs in the future and so on. But it's still the same at the moment we're talking. And maybe it's also to get back to this robot versus humans, at least we need to know when to use this artificial intelligence, or how to program algorithms, or be aware of what they can do and not do, to think critically about them also. And also it's about the risks and destructive actions challenging ethics and democracy. And what you see is cyberbullying, hate speech, discrimination, harassment, and cyber hate, and so on. So we need to support the youth into being aware, know how to tackle. Is it a new situation? There has been bullying going on, but now with the cyberbullying, I can understand that, okay, things are more public, more open. It hits you, so to speak, anywhere, wherever you are or so. So we need digital competences also to support the youth in knowing how to navigate in this new media landscape, for example. Because in one sense, when we talk about the risks of these destructive actions, of course there are risks on one hand, but on the other hand, it can also be that we need to support youth to make them included in this new digital world, so to speak. And because this is also their way of building their own identity, not just their online identity, they are building their identity. It's a part of their complex relation building, and it's a process of identity constructions and so on. And as stated by Björk, for example, that the youth, they via social medias and what happens in discussing on Facebook, for example, and so on, they position themselves and others in the struggle to doing gender and the desire to participate in a certain peer culture. And again, in the social inclusion and from a social inclusion perspective, it can seem like a risk to make the young people meet this hate speech and cyberbullying, but also we need to learn how to navigate in this, because it's a future that is here and we need to accept it also and need to learn how to navigate in it in a sense. Yeah, and I also like to point out that we are in a way supporting the young people and the youth. And I also looked a bit at the policy of aiming for digital youth work and realized that it's also a way of not just helping youth, but also helping youth organizations and having a kind of an organizational perspective on this digitalization and how they can support youth.
Lars, just a quick note, we have about 10 minutes remaining.
Yeah, that's great. I think I will move on for a few more minutes and then I open for more questions. From an organizational perspective, I realized when one of the problems could be when as I interpret it also when reading through the policies, how do we really meet, how do we change organizations as well? And how do we support decision making at various levels down to youth? So it's kind of it is kind of an internal change within the organization. We have the digitalization of society, and we have this organizational digital developments that we need, and we need to develop digital competences. And then we have to combine it with the youth work competences that we have, for example, within digital youth work. So it's kind of an internal contextual thing, and but it's also an external thing. We need to find this. What I have is an example of what I've learned is that we can call it a chain of command. That what are the decisions from the youth up to through the youth workers, youth organizations, decision makers at local and regional level, via national and international level. How do policy and decisions really work their way through the system? Who takes what decisions, and how can we kind of turn to the right actor to know that we can have digitalization that also involves social inclusion, who takes the decisions and why, and so on. So I propose that we could also think from an organizational perspective, understanding the decision-making processes. So what I found with all the things that I've talked up to this moment is two key findings, I would say, is that transformation readiness is how do we make organizations and how do we make decision-making structures also ready for this digital transformation and social inclusion, and how do we listen to the one who are in the real contexts, the context-based negotiations of the use of information and information and communication technologies, as I call it. How do we make, how do we learn from the ones really working in youth work? How do we learn from the youth that are really in need of social inclusion? What do they need? How can they do it, and so on? And how does this relate to the decision making that is made? And I would like to skip over then to a kind of summary before I have some questions about advantages or risks. A lot of the perspectives that I have used now, I know that they are kind of colored by me and what I've seen in policy. But they can also, advantages can be understood as advantages in some contexts, and risks can be seen as risks in some contexts, but it can also be the other way around. So when I ask you now for questions, I will give you a figure. When we talk about digitalization and social inclusion, I think it is important how we understand policy and the ambitions of policy. Because if we have a high understanding of what policy really wants for when it comes to digitalization and social inclusion, then we can view policy and ambitions with policy as a support. So, but if we think that, okay, if I read policy, if I see the ambitions with digitalization and ambitions with social inclusion, I think it's only a way of controlling people. I find it as control. And this control and support can maybe be seen as advantages and risks also. So what do you think are the small decisions or the small things that will make the perceptions of people tip over towards being support, and when will it tip over towards being understood as control? And I know that we have a variety of experiences and context listening here. Do you think that digitalization and social inclusion to be supportive for youth, how should the decisions be made? What are the small decisions in this context, so to speak? So please react via writing something in the question or just shouting out loud too, maybe. I'll wait for anyone to react or any question.
Just write on the questions pane if you want, and I will read it out loud to Lars. Or raise your hand if you want to use audio. Anyone?
Maybe not. It's okay. So what I then would like to say, I can skip over to some.
There is one comment, Lars. Oh, yeah. Now actually there's two.
Yes, please.
The first comment was inclusion of youth workers in the drawing of policies and strategies. So were youth workers missing from that drawing?
I cannot answer to that one. Are they missing? Please react and say.
Krenaro writes that they're referring to their country.
Yeah.
I think this is a relevant theme. If youth workers are supposed to have young people participate in decision making, are they themselves actually participating when drawing up policies?
Definitely. Important thing to ask, and how it is done in various countries. And should the youth be? And should they do it via digital participation? Or your countries, do they have such systems where they can participate easily, no matter where they live in the country, for example?
There are a couple of more comments also. There is a comment from Piret, how they think it was an interesting point that digital youth work can be a way to control young people. And I guess this is true of youth work in general. Youth workers can be seen as the sort of fire brigade where they kind of control the youth population so they don't make a fuss and everything is nice. Manfred also comments that I guess all support will end up being controlled because right now it does not go independent. And he also adds, if more people can get access, the control will not get smaller.
Yeah, and why I use this kind of tipping point towards control or support, it can be one way of understanding how should we talk about this digitalization and social inclusion. Do we talk about it in such a way that it is supportive, or is it just understood as controlled? I could end a bit with this image. What is the purpose of technology? Well, digitalization and social inclusion. In 2013, at a conference for technology enhanced learning, how to enhance learning via technology. Lina Munari, who was a senior program officer within learning technologies, she had an image basically like this. It was a bit different, but it had the same meaning. She said that it is the technology within education has somewhat focused to be better and better and better developed. So in a sense, she said that the front wheel could be maybe the apps that we use. The front wheel can symbolize the apps that we use. They have to be better. The technology has to be better and better and better. But what is really the purpose of the use of technology and how we want to use it? Because if we just develop some parts of the technology, is it helping the overall concept of education, for example? Or if the whole wheelbarrow, in this case, symbolize social inclusion, how do we make the whole wheel barrier work better and just not develop parts of it? So I would like to thank you for listening. You can always get back to me with questions whenever you'd like to. You will find me, you can Google me or whatever. And if you find things provocative or you don't agree or impossible to agree with from your context, I'm not here to tell you how to do it. I trust that you also have the ability to do it the best way in your context. So thank you very much. Good luck with the symposium later on. And yes, see you.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Lars. I just opened up a poll that you can vote in how you found this webinar. I believe we will, Lars, will you be providing your presentation for participants also?
I can definitely do that. I will share it. How do I share it?
Just send it to me by email and I will put it forward. Some people already asked during this session.
Yeah, I will send the presentation to you. All the images that I talked about will be included in that presentation. So I'll send it to you.
Okay. Just to know, about 80% think that this webinar was either very good or excellent.
Yeah, that's very nice of them to say so.
Okay, but thank you, everyone, and I hope everyone will also be able to attend the webinars next week. So thank you.
Thank you, you for doing a great job.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.